What's up guys, it's Jen and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are going to be talking about hydrogen peroxide. Now we're going to be breaking down exactly what's inside these bottles, and hopefully after this video, you'll be able to make a better, more educated choice when coloring hair. So if you wanted to learn more about hydrogen peroxide and developers, keep on watching. All right, so one of the things that we need to know is that developer actually comes in two different formulas or two different types. So what you're going to be able to find is a cream developer, and it also comes in a liquid. Now, if you're actually comparing these two, there's not much of a change at all with power. So just because the cream has additional conditioners in it or buffers in order to make the consistency different, you're gonna have the same exact amount of strength. So just because it's a cream doesn't mean it's any less damaging. So I prefer a cream developer versus a liquid. The liquid's gonna be a little too drippy, whereas this is gonna give you a little bit more control over your application. Now, in order to understand what's actually inside of these bottles, we have to understand hydrogen peroxide, like I referred to earlier, H2O2. Now, in a bottle of 10 volume developer, you are actually going to get a 3% amount of hydrogen peroxide with the bottle. Now, as you go up in volume, you're actually getting a stronger, higher percentage of peroxide in each bottle. So the way I like to refer to it is in increments of 3. So if this 10 volume bottle is 3% hydrogen peroxide, 20 volume is actually going to be 6% hydrogen peroxide. So 3 plus 3, 6. Now, when you go up to 30, 3 plus 3 plus 3 is 9, meaning that 30 volume is actually 9% hydrogen peroxide, and 40 volume being 12% hydrogen peroxide. Now, when you buy the developers, normally it's just showing you the volumes, 10, 20, 30, 40. But what I like to do is I will mark the bottles with the additional percentage. So it just helps to remind me what I'm actually reaching for. So I can write 3%, 6%, 9%, and 12%. And that way it helps to break down what the actual percentage of hydrogen peroxide is within each bottle. So the next thing I wanted to explain to you guys is exactly what the word volume refers to. Now, if you're not using the percentages to refer to your peroxides, you're probably referring to them as 10 volume, 20 volume, 30 volume, but I wanted to explain to you guys exactly how it gets that name. So this part can get a little tricky, so follow along and I promise it'll be a little bit of a light bulb that goes off. So when you are talking about one measurement of, let's say, 10 volume, I'm going to refer to a milliliter of developer using this little tiny molecule. Now, you guys may have remembered these little molecules because I used them in my video when I was explaining to you guys the different types of hair color. If you guys haven't seen that video, I'll link it down below so you can check that out as well. When we're looking at this little tiny molecule, imagine that this is 1 milliliter of cream developer. Now, some of us use grams to measure color, but I'm gonna use milliliters right now for this particular explanation, because when you think of 1 milliliter of 10 volume developer, it's actually going to be releasing oxygen as it's processing. So in a 10 volume bottle of peroxide, when you use 1 milliliter of peroxide, you are going to be releasing 10 cubic centimeters of oxygen. Now, a cubic centimeter is the same size as 1 milliliter of liquid measure, if that makes sense. So with 1 milliliter, you're releasing 10 cubic centimeters of oxygen from this chemical reaction. Now, moving on to 20 volume developer, if you use the same milliliter of 20 volume developer, same measurements, you're actually going to be releasing 20 cubic centimeters of oxygen during that chemical process. Same amount of peroxide, but 2 different releases of oxygen. And now this is just gonna go all the way up. So from 30 volume, we're gonna be using the same milliliter of measure of this particular developer, and you are going to be releasing 30 cubic centimeters of oxygen during the chemical process, and so on and so on. So 1 milliliter of 40 volume peroxide is going to be releasing 40 cubic centimeters of oxygen, which is a volume measure because it's the amount of space that it takes up. So last but not least, 50 volume, same milliliter of developer, there it goes, is going to be releasing 50 cubic centimeters of oxygen. So this is how you are measuring the volume of each strength, is how much oxygen is actually being released from the same measurement of developer. So depending on how much strength you're needing, if you visualize this release of oxygen, that's how big your chemical reaction is going to be, and then that will help you to choose the best option for your coloring process. All right, now that you guys have a visual of exactly how much oxygen is being released, now you can think of what's actually inside these bottles is a certain percentage of hydrogen peroxide, meaning if these oxygen molecules are being released, what is being left over? So if you can visualize H2O2, one of the oxygen molecules starts releasing, what you're left with is H2O, meaning if you let this bottle release all of the oxygen that's inside, you are going to be left with a bottle of water, which sounds crazy, but that's exactly what happens when oxygen is being released from the hydrogen peroxide. Now, I'm going to tell you guys a quick story, a little bit of a horror story when it comes to doing hair, but hey, let's be honest, we all have them. So quite a few years ago, I was doing a platinum card retouch on one of my clients who has pretty dark hair, I would say level 2-3 hair. So as I was popping all the foils in the back, I was moving towards the front and I started noticing dripping happening off of the foils where I started. I started noticing the floor had drips all over it of water, like a clear-like substance coming out of these foils. And when I went to go check on them, not only the foils had the foils puffed up, but they were also warm to the touch. And when I opened them, liquid started dripping out of them. So of course I quickly took all the foils out, ran her over to the shampoo bowl, rinsed everything out, and her hair was blonde, like light, level 9, 10 blonde within 20 minutes. And I, from that moment, was so confused as to A, what happened? Why did it puff up? Why did it get so hot? And what was this liquid coming out of the foil? So if you guys refer back to what I was explaining about hydrogen peroxide being oxygen and water, basically what happened is there was a too aggressive chemical reaction happening within that foil. Now, when hydrogen peroxide decomposes, it actually is an exothermic reaction, which releases heat and water. So what's happening is inside the foil, the hydrogen peroxide was reacting way too aggressively with not only the lightener, but also whatever was on the hair, and it exposed it to an additional amount of heat. There was also an extra amount of oxygen, which is what puffed up the foil. And then when I opened it, it was literal water dripping out of her foils after that oxygen had been released. So most of the time sometimes when that happens, it will actually be because of an additional catalyst that's on the surface of the hair. And what that means is it's a product that will make the chemical reaction more aggressive, which is why I highly recommend, if you guys are doing any type of color corrections or a client you guys have never done before, do a test strand. It only takes about 10 to 15 minutes, but if you're gonna have a chemical reaction from the hydrogen peroxide, it will show up in your test strand. So if that's ever happened to you guys, I would love to hear it. Let me know down in the comments. I'm sure some of us have had some crazy hair stories, and it would be great if we could all share them, because hey, it happens to all of us and it's a learning process. So once I figured out what that was, I was able to break down exactly what happened, and I can avoid it from ever happening in the future. Now I want to explain to you guys what's going to be the best developer choice when coloring hair. So If you want to use a 10 volume, you have to keep in mind that it's actually going to leave the hair at the same level or go darker. Now there are developer options that are lower than these. You actually might recognize those uses for demi-permanent colors, and I definitely recommend those because they're going to be a little bit less aggressive through the mids and ends of the hair. But right now I'm going to be referring to only like a root retouch or a regrowth situation. A 10 volume is going to leave the hair at the same level, or you can make it darker. A 20 volume is going to be your best option when it comes to covering gray or any type of resistant hair, and it's going to lift your hair a couple levels depending on how you're formulating. 30 volume is going to lift your hair about 3 levels, and then 40 volume is going to be more for a high lift color or a blonding color that you need the strength for. I also put 50 volume here, but I highly recommend you don't use this on scalp. This is gonna be more for something you do, maybe a balayage lightener or a clay lightener that tends to be a little bit more gentle. That's when your 50 volume is gonna come into play. I would never use this on scalp, and I rarely use 40 on scalp. So typically in the salon, you're gonna have a lot of 20 volume. That's something we use a ton in the salon. I always have a backup of 20. But usually you're going to stick to anywhere between 10 to 40 when doing any type of retouch application. When it comes to blonding services, this is also a time where you're gonna make a choice with what peroxide you're gonna use. And just keep in mind that if your tub of lightener says it's going to get you 8 levels of lift, you can still achieve those 8 levels no matter what peroxide strength you are using. So I don't like to use anything above 40 in a foil. So this is gonna be only for balayage lightener or clay lightener, like I mentioned earlier. So in a foil, I only like to stick within this range. And keep in mind, a 10 volume can get you 8 levels of lift. So when I'm doing a full highlight or a platinum card, I like to start with a level 10. Now, I am not the fastest foiler on the planet. I'm not the quickest, but I'm definitely not the slowest either. But I like to take my time. And so because I know I'm gonna be foiling for maybe a couple hours, I'm gonna start with a 10 volume because it's going to get me to the level of lift that I want, but it's gonna be nice and low and slow. So as I am mixing the bowls, I only like to mix about maybe 15 grams of lightener at a time. The next time I mix up, I'm gonna grab a 20 volume, and then when I mix again, I'm gonna grab a 30, and then the very, very last section of the hair, usually on the top, last few foils will be a 40 volume. And by the time these foils have processed to the level of lightness that I'm looking for, the 10 volume will be done and ready to go. So that's gonna be the best option to not only keep your hair healthy, but also to make sure that the entire head is lifted to the same level of blonde. Keep in mind to follow all of your manufacturer's directions when it comes to how long you want to process that particular chemical for on that hair. So when I'm putting a 10 volume on the first section of the hair, it may process longer than what the manufacturer's directions are recommending, but that's kind of a risk you're willing to take to know that you're gonna get to that level of lightness gently. So just because it's a lower volume doesn't always necessarily mean it's healthier, because the hair is now living in an alkaline environment for a pretty long time. So within the peroxides that you're using, these are all alkaline substances. So you want to afterwards return the hair to the acidic state that it's happiest and likes to live in. So if you wanted some more information regarding the pH scale and how it affects the hair, I'm gonna leave a link down below to my video where I talk all about the pH scale, acidity and alkalinity, and how it works in the hair world. So I'll leave that link down below and you guys can check that out too. But remember that anytime peroxide is on the hair, you have to return the hair to its acidic state where it's happiest and healthiest. All right, guys, that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys wanted some more information or had any questions, please leave them in the comments down below. I would also appreciate a thumbs up if you guys learned anything new today. And also, please make sure to subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.